Many observers of the way we live our lives describe the contemporary United States as a national security state. More recently, Yale law professor Jack Balkin has argued that we have moved from an era of national security state to that of the national surveillance state, grounded in the, quote, collection, collation, and analysis of information about populations both in the United States and around the world, end of quote. One obvious reason for this development is the insecurity that all of us feel as a consequence of 9/11 and its aftermath. But the reasons for this transformation is more complex than just that. For one thing, while 9/11 has accelerated this trend, it was a trend that was in motion long before that day. Furthermore, while we see increased surveillance for the purpose of national security and counterterrorism, surveillance is hardly limited to those objects. Law enforcement relies increasingly on new technologies that allow for greater watchfulness and more intrusion than we were accustomed to in the past. The requirements of the modern welfare state also demand that the state that delivers benefits also knows who we are, where we are, and what we're up to. Nor are we monitored by government alone. Private actors record our comings and goings, our networks of associations, and our consumer preferences, in some instances in order to sell that information to government, but in many other instances for other commercial purposes. This symposium borrows its title from the 1980s rhythm and blues song, "Somebody's Watching Me." I will spare you a rendition. In fact, however, there are many people watching each of us. Despite the early hour, all of us have already been subject to surveillance, whether we know it or not. If you drove here, you were subjected to the gaze of several traffic cameras en route and in University Circle. Your walk from the parking lot took you past additional security cameras. If you came to us from a distance and traveled through airports, then I don't have to tell you, you went through a variety of screenings. You also watched and checked against lists and sorted in one way or another. If you come to us from Canada, you pass through the additional layer of security provided by the Customs and Border Protection, including evaluation under the ATS or automated targeting system, which assigned each of you a risk assessment score. Of course, we are also webcasting this conference in the hopes that there are many eyes out there not present in the room who will be watching us. We live, in other words, in a highly surveilled society. And that's because we or someone on our behalf has chosen to watch, and because our technological ability to collect and analyze information has become much more powerful in recent years than it was previously. Often, surveillance serves goals that we agree with. We're happy to be surveilled. We want air travel to be safe, our borders to be secure, and for our university community to be both open and safe. We may be delighted when Amazon or another vendor recommends a book or a product based on our buying habits. As one of our speakers today, David Lyon, has noted, we want the government to know who we are and where we are in order to enable us to vote and to receive promised government benefits. We may even want strict enforcement of our traffic laws through cameras, or at least for other people. Nevertheless, we're here today because surveillance and our ability to see more and more and to use what we see in more powerful ways poses challenges to personal autonomy and to political liberty. As Alexis de Tocqueville long ago noted in his masterful study of the American character and nation, Democracy in America, in the end, all problems in the United States become legal problems. And indeed, much of the discussion today about how we reconcile our desire for safety, security, and the fruits of the welfare state with our concerns about erosion of liberty will focus on legal dilemmas and legal solutions. But de Tocqueville also had a tendency to overstate regarding the law. After all, he described lawyers as the aristocracy of America in a country that was otherwise lacking in an aristocracy. So this conference will look not only to legal questions and solutions, but to other ways in which we confront and attempt to master the surveillance society. Why does that? I suddenly think people are watching me more closely than they were before the lights came on. But we will look at it to determine the extent to which surveillance serves our national goals appropriately against our notions of freedom and autonomy. Our conference has been planned and is hosted by the Institute for Global Security, Law, and Policy, which is a component of the Frederick K. Cox Center for International Law here at the law school. The Institute focuses on questions of national security, war and peace, the threat of terrorism, and the challenges that counterterrorism strategies pose to civil liberties. It has brought a wide range of speakers from many academic disciplines, from government and the legal community, and from other related fields of practice to foster discussion and debate on these topics in the best traditions of the university and this law school. Its most recent conference was on combating terrorism financing. In keeping with the high standards of the Institute, we have gathered for you today an exciting collection of speakers to address an array of topics related to surveillance. I want to thank you all for your attendance. Hope you will find the day to be both illuminating and provocative. It gives me great pleasure to open this symposium, which is so timely. And with that, I'd like to turn the conference over to Professor Robert Strassfeld, the director of the Institute for Global Security, Law, and Policy, and the principal architect for the symposium which follows. Bob?
I want to add my welcome. Good morning to all of you. Thank you for coming. And I am going to keep this very short so that you have actually some time to fuel up with coffee before our first panel. So thank you, Dean Rawson, for your introduction. And thank you all for coming. And I have a couple of other thank yous, and I see none of the people I want to thank in the room. But first of all, this conference is funded in part by a generous grant from the United States District Court for the Northern District of Ohio. Their attorney outreach program, also known, some of you may know it as the Library Fund, which is what it used to be called. And we are very grateful to them, and especially to Chief Judge Carr, who called this fund to my attention and encouraged me to apply for a grant. This when he turned down an offer to speak on FISA because he was going to be elsewhere today. I'd also like to thank Alice Simon and Nancy Cantor, neither of whom are in the room, but both of whom are a presence here at this conference would not be happening without their assistance, as any number of you who have interacted with them know. And then finally, the proceedings of the conference, the papers will be published in the Journal of International Law. We have some students here from the journal, and there will be others over the course of the day. They will be doing important tasks like manning microphones and also ensuring that speakers don't overrun their time. And they're a tough crowd, so the speakers be warned. All of you, I want to thank all of you for coming. I think this is going to be a terrific, challenging, at times perhaps disturbing conference, and your participation is important for its success. On that score, let me just tell you, we are webcasting, which means that when the time comes for audience participation, questions from the audience, our students from the Journal of International Law will be manning microphones, and please wait till the microphone gets to you to ask your question, because otherwise it will not be heard by the world at large, which we hope are watching. Our first panel is at 9:30. We have two panels this morning. The first on surveillance in public spaces and CCTV. The second on globalization of surveillance. We will then have a lunch break. Lunch is provided. And two panels this afternoon, the first on FISA and FISA reform, the second on resistance to surveillance. I think they will all be interesting, challenging, provocative at times, I hope, and I hope that all of you can stay for the whole of the symposium. And with that, you have your first unscheduled break to go get some coffee. Please be back by 9:30 because we want to keep on schedule.